think about becoming a lawyer until much later. And for them, their vision sometimes, those kids, is really narrow about what do you want to be when you grow up even, you know, or is there hope for the future? And then seeing these law students, you know, people who look like Jan, and it's like, oh, they're pretty normal, you know.
Well, I wouldn't say that.
You know, I could do that.
Yeah.
And honestly, that this person cares about me enough to give up a Friday evening and come and work with me and talk with me and validate who I am and be respectful. Those things are really valuable.
Yeah.
Really valuable. Yeah.
So what's going on in our juvenile justice system?
Well, a lot. It's actually an amazing time. I mean, when I kind of think about where we are in the spectrum of time. So we've got a lot of problems. You know, it wasn't so long ago Department of Justice was in our facility, and you know, there's consent decrees and a lot of scrutiny that things have not improved as much as maybe they should. The Pew Foundation came last year and did a study. They found a number of problems. That we have kids who are incarcerated who are actually only status offenders. That means they haven't actually broken the law except the laws that relate to being a child. But they end up in trouble, and because our courts really care about them, but there's no other place that's safe for them to be, they get incarcerated. So you got the pregnant kid who is going to be on the streets, maybe trafficked, or using substance abuses and abusing substances, and there's no other place for them. So what they found was the resources to really help the young people are lacking, and we need to address that. They also found that kids who get put on probation get put on probation for a really extended period of time, and the basis of that's kind of well-meaning. The court, the probation officers want to look out for them. But the problem is that when you're in probation, you have this long list of probation conditions.
Oh yeah, I know those.
Well, and they're all things that adolescents do normally, like come home late.
Yeah.
Or miss school, or get into a scuffle, you know, even get into an angry, especially if they're not getting help to get better connected. So the Pew Foundation came in, gave a report. There was a bill with, I think, 20 pages, 40 pages, passed the legislature. It was funded with some money. Funding begins soon. I think it's November. And it says a lot of things about how the youth need to have better treatment, that resources need to be made available, that there need to be transition plans for kids when they're returning, that conditions of probation need to be more focused, and so there's just a lot of energy. But what's really exciting about that is that everybody's kind of pulled together. So it's not just the court, it's not just the prosecutor and the public defender, it's the Department of Health, the Department of Education, you know, it's the Department of Human Services.
Yeah.
It's everybody working together. And to me, that's so exciting, you know, to see it and to help to be a part of it.
Jan, you had experience in family court. Listening to Lauri talk, what were your observations about the juvenile system?
And when I was working for family court for one summer, I actually got into a lot of different programs that Lauri had mentioned earlier. So I was helping with 0 to 3, I was helping with Kids First, and I was helping with the court improvement program. And I was surprised at how many programs there are to help these children, like how many people care in the state. And the fact that they all work together, the fact that there's even a court improvement program, it all really, really impressed me, and I was happy to be a part of that. And everyone works so hard. It's all partnerships with the university, partnerships with the state, with DHS, and Epic Ohana. So it was a lot of connections that I was able to make, and I really felt like everything I was doing there was making an impact. And it was a really great experience for me.
I'll throw this out there. One thing, I read a report that you emailed me before the show, and it talked about the high level of substance abuse and mental health counseling that's needed. What was your experience with, what can you elaborate more on that?
Well, it's a big problem for our young people, and actually in the other area that we work in child abuse and neglect, most of the families who end up in the child welfare system also are experiencing substance abuse problems. So it's huge. For our young people, there are so few beds for them. If they need substance abuse treatment that's intense and structured, there's so little for them. And that's one of the really important things that we need to address.
What about the mental health services? What type of mental health issues? I mean, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is I can see there's a certain segment of society that just thinks, you know what, treat juveniles the same way you treat adults. They should know better. Imprison them, etc. As we both, as all three of us know, that the system is there to rehabilitate, not to punish. And so when we get down to mental health, what type of mental health issues do the juveniles face, or have you seen them face? You know what I mean?
Well, and we've been involved in a project called Wraparound, which is when, for young people, we try to bring a whole team of people together so that they can work together to meet the needs of the young person. And in some of those cases, here's some of the things that I've seen. One is on a sort of a lower level, grief. You know, Judge Radius and I, a few years ago, went to the girls' facility and read the files of the girls who were incarcerated. And I was struck by how every single one of those kids had experienced a loss of somebody that was very important to them, a grandpa, an uncle, a dad, a mom, at a very young age. And those things have not been addressed. So there's grief, there's depression, there's substance abuse problems. Some of our kids have very serious mental health problems. So one of the kids that we're working with has fetal alcohol syndrome. That means that in utero, he was exposed to alcohol, and that has affected his cognitive ability, and it's really a difficult thing for him. Some of our kids may have been also exposed to ice or other substances in utero, and so there are also some cognitive behavioral problems that come from that. So it's a whole slew of issues and problems. One of our kids is autistic, but on the more educable edge of that, but having a lot of trouble understanding social cues, and then getting in trouble because of that, because he misreads the cues or just gets in trouble. Right. So it's a huge spectrum and very important. So the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Department of the Department of Health has a unit that's devoted to the facility, and what Judge Browning has been doing is really working hard to get CAMD services more integrated with juvenile justice. But that's one of the things that came up, how important that is, that we get good service for those.
I think a lot of adults and the viewers here have heard me, and you've heard me share my story, know that I'm a recovering alcoholic and drug addict. But I also went to prison. I also was put on supervised release, and I had a good probation officer. I mean, she really did care. But I've seen others who use the system to almost like, don't break a rule. Like when I got to the halfway house, right, it was just all about rules, right? So no matter what, it just wasn't helpful, right? I mean, because it came down to, if you're a little bit late, they didn't care about any excuse. One day, Professor Roth drove me to the halfway house, right? They said, well, do you have authority, do you have a authorization for him to be driving you, right? Permission. I mean, it was just crazy, man. And so that was a hassle. And I going back to what you were saying earlier about probation, is that one of the things that hopefully you want to see changed? Is that it's not so much rule-oriented as opposed to working with the individual client, so to speak, to see that they continue to develop and foster their growth.
I think that is one of the things we're trying to accomplish in some of these projects that we're doing and the court is doing. So build on strengths, and then figure out what the needs are and then connect the needs. But what you're saying about the rules, that's really important. Think back to what's the task that an adolescent has, a normal adolescent, not one who's in trouble. It's to be independent you know, and to make their own decisions. So rules grate on you even more when you're an adolescent, I think, than when you're an adult, right? I mean,
well,
you tell your
I've never
kid,
grown up, so to speak. No,
well,
but you're right. No,
you
you're
tell
right.
your kid,
You're right.
go do the dishes, and they'll say,
You're right.
why should I?
There's a natural defiance that comes
That's
around
a part of
teenage
that process. So then you layer that on with, you know, mental health issues. The other real big problem is education issues. These kids are often way behind in school. If they're running away a lot, they're behind. But they may also be running away because school's not a place where they feel
safe.
You know, safe. Or,
yeah. And home's not a place where a lot of them feel safe.
Yeah,
and so they run. I met so many young ladies, Jen, I'm sure you, that were in the facility when we would go out on Friday nights, and I just felt so bad for them because a lot of them had ran away from an environment. I mean, it's almost like, you know, you want me to go home, but I can't survive here, you know, because of maybe some abuse going on or whatever, and they just leave, and then next thing you know, they're in the system.
Yeah, yeah.
And one of the, actually, when I was reading through the report as well, one of the things that really stuck with me is in developing all those programs for the mental health issues and the substance abuse issues, it all came down to money and logistics. And they were saying logistically, every bed at the correctional facility costs about $200,000 a year to run.
Yeah.
And if you think about if we had less people getting admitted into the correctional facility, you could reuse that money that you would save and invest in those programs to help to hopefully develop those further, so that they work better for the kids that are possibly going to go into the correctional facility.
And that's one of the projects I'm really excited about too, that the Office of Youth Services and the court is involved in, is trying to divert the kids before, you know, one thing that people talk about is this pipeline to prison, to adult prison.
Oh yeah.
And if we can divert the kids who are running away, and most kids run away for a good reason, or to something, you know, maybe to their boyfriend or girlfriend's house or to whatever, but it also might be that there's something at home that's just not safe. And so there's a project that's about to get started called Ho'opono Mamo, which means to cherish our children, you know, and to help them find a better path. It loosely means that. And these kids, when they're picked up for a status offense or a minor misdemeanor the first time, instead of going into the juvenile justice system, will go to an assessment center, and for this pilot, that'll be at Susanna Wesley, and somebody will talk story with them and try to find out what's going on, help them to get reconnected, you know, and have the kinds of just support that they might need, so that this first offense is the last offense, and they don't get deeper and deeper into the system. The kids we're seeing in the facility, they're down the road, you know.
We've talked about this program a lot in the current class that I'm taking with
What's the name of the class you're taking?
It's Children, Parents, and the Law.
All right.
And in that class, we were talking about this program, this initiative that we're trying to roll out. And one of the really important points that I took away from it is that it's a choice that the children have to commit to. So when they commit that status offense or that misdemeanor, they're given a choice to actually go through the assessment program or to go to the correctional facility.
Why is that important that they're given a choice? Why do you think that is?
I feel like it's something that they can take ownership of and they can commit to, so that they're more invested in themselves and in the program to actually get through it. It's something that they're committing to from the very beginning, and I feel like it's more likely that they'll follow through because they made that decision.
And we know that if youth have a voice and an ownership in the decision making, they're more likely to follow through. And if the parents are engaged, there's more likely to be success. And one of the things in that study is that, you know, we have all these treatment programs for kids. There's boot camp and, you know, those kinds of things.
It scared me straight, right? Yeah,
exactly,
that
like scared
work.
straight. And actually, it makes it worse.
Yeah, no.
The studies show that if you just do nothing, you have a better outcome than some of those programs. So we're hoping, but parent and youth engagement actually makes a difference. And so the research shows that, and that's what we're hoping this will do.
All right. Well, we're going to go to a break and then come back, and we're going to talk a little bit more. We'll expand a little bit more into family court and family law here in Hawaii. And we'll be right back after this break.
Hi, I'm Jay Fidel. That's Ted Ralston. You know, Ted is the host of Where the Road Leads. It shows every Friday from 4 to 5 p.m. It's about technology. It's about how people collaborating and solve problems with modern technology. It's where the road leads. We all know that. We should all be listening. Join us there, 4 to 5 p.m. every Friday. Now, what about that do you agree with?
All of it.
I knew he'd say that. Aloha. Say aloha.
Aloha.
Good.
Host. Maybe Oprah. You should take over.
All right, we're back with our guest, Lauri Tochicki, Professor Lauri Tochicki, Attorney Lauri Tochicki, and our favorite law student here, Jen Cha, who is in law school and has shown a devotion towards family law and juvenile justice. And we're back to talk a little bit about family court here in Hawaii, family law, and what's important for our viewers to know.
Well, you know, I think our family court's pretty special.
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan. And what Jen was saying about how she was watching, you know, the court improvement process, and we have these courts like family drug court, girls court, and what that shows is this real commitment on the part of our family court.
I love Judge Browning. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
when he inspires me. You know what? Anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, you get him going, and he's very inspirational.
Yeah, I'm
it's
trying to
true.
get him on the show in the next few months.
Well, good. That would be really good because it's that kind of leadership
Yeah.
that's made a big difference. And and it's really that it's not just like the court behind, you know, the judges in their robes behind the counter or the bar. They have a history of connecting with the community. We have a history of being multidisciplinary. And that's one thing I really want to emphasize is our court's really special. So in 1964, so it's 50 years ago, a bunch of really smart people got interested in the idea of bringing all of the things that have to do with family law into one court. So it's not in probate court or juvie court or you know, and it was scattered all over the place, and it is scattered all over the place in a lot of states still.
Yeah.
So the idea was that we'd have a cadre of people, that probation officers would be social workers, you know, and actually the early probation officers had beats. So they were assigned different schools, and they would, you know, just kind of walk in and get to know the school, get to know the counselors, and there were social workers for other things too. In those days, in the 1960s, it was still fault divorce, so there were reconciliation people that you had to go to before you could get a divorce, those kinds of things. But really smart people, Judge Batusek, Judge King, and a real heart for this is going to be a different way that we handle family matters, because family matters don't really fit in the mold of the adversarial system. So innovations like mediation, making sure that there's, you know, like the specialty courts, court improvement processes, reaching out into the community and forming coalitions to help make the whole system better. That's what our family court's been about for 50 years now. So I'm hoping that there can be a good celebration of that in 2016, when the court reaches its 50th birthday. So July 1, 2016 will be 50 years of family court. And it is a really
Sounds like you have something planned already for the big celebration.
Well, I don't, but I'm hoping somebody will, and I wouldn't mind helping out.
Okay.
But I think Jen's experience is really indicative of that. Like Judge Brownie's really excited about having students in court. And I don't know that there's any other court in Hawaii that has that kind of partnership. You know?
Yeah.
And it's funny just going to school and meeting all the different professors. Everyone's so involved. So I took mediation clinic as well, and I met Tracy, who heads up the Mediation Center for the Pacific. And as I was volunteering there and doing assignments there, I saw more and more people from family court, and there are judges who are mediators, there are lawyers who are mediators, and they're all working towards a common goal. And it was really impressive to see.
Is it a emotional court to be involved in? I could see just, you know, becoming attached to the parties, the families, seeing families, you know, either come apart or try to get back together. just tough emotional issues. How do you deal with that?
I mean, it definitely is. There are cases that are tough to see. I think the first case that I sat in on at family court, it was a man who had been incarcerated and he had never met his child before until that court session, and that was the first time he ever saw his baby.
Wow.
And after the case was heard, he asked the judge if he could hold his baby for the first time, and they allowed him to do that, and I was able to be involved in that moment. And if, you know, it was really, really emotional, and it was really telling of the rest of the experience that I would have at family court. And I could just feel how much everyone cares.
Yeah, yeah. But the opposite things happen too, where you see the child maybe being separated from a parent.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that emotionally?
Yeah, no, it's tough. It is tough, and you know, one thought is that when people come to court, especially divorce court, people come to court and they're at their worst because they're so angry with one another. You know, it brings out the
That's why I
worst
never
in
did.
you.
You know, I would do criminal law any day, but divorce law, heck, no, man.
Yeah. And Judge Town used to say, when you go to family court, you see good people at their worst. When you go to criminal court, you see bad people at their best because they're all cleaned up and, you know. but it is tough.
Yeah,
it is tough, and I think it's really important. And this is something that I think we do a good job of at Richardson, is to help people understand that if you're in any law, you have to understand yourself. You have to understand, you know, your own triggers and your own stuff, your own history, so that when you're interacting with a client, you know, you can understand your role, their role, what barriers there are, and not necessarily get sucked in. The other thing that lawyers can do is we can take that mean situation between people, and if we're not careful,
exacerbate it.
We can make it pretty bad. Yeah, we can fuel the fire. Whereas, you know, I think a good family law attorney does the opposite. It helps people understand their rights, understand the situation, helps them have a place to talk, make sure they get the services they need, maybe counseling.
Helps them focus on the kids and the effect that a nasty divorce could have on them.
Exactly. To do things, you know, for the best interest of the child and focus on that. A good lawyer is going to do that.
Yeah.
And again, I'm really proud, and that's the best part about working at the law school, right? Is watching and helping people to develop those skills and be that kind of lawyer that we need in family court. Yeah.
So what do you see, you talked about no fault and then fault divorce, right? So now we have no fault. Is there anything in family court that tries to keep the families together, or is it just...
You know, it's interesting. I mean, in divorce, basically you just have to check a box that says the marriage is irretrievably broken. When family court first started, we would send couples to, you know, somebody for counseling. And I think it's up to the lawyers to do that. I know when I practiced family law, I would always pause a bit and say, you know, help me understand how you're getting to this decision and if this really is the decision you want. But we don't, because it is no fault, right? And once it goes, most divorces never even see a judge. You fill out all the paperwork, you submit it, and then the judge will get a big stack of files and read through to make sure that it looks okay, you know, that it looks sort of fair, and sign off. So that's the experience for most divorces. That said, too, most children, lots of people aren't getting married at all now. So the number of divorces actually is pretty steady. But the number of children born with their mom and dad not married to one another has gone up steadily.
Now, lately here in Hawaii and nationwide, we've seen cases of child abuse. Adrian Peterson is right now facing charges of whipping his child with a switch, which my grandma was famous for that, man. I mean, really, she was. It was an old, but and you got the domestic violence cases going on abroad, and then the one that HPD was involved in here. Is family court involved in any of that in any way?
Yes.
How?
All over the place. Well, so
See, I don't know if there's a separate thing for domestic violence, isn't there?
no, no. Our family court handles domestic violence
See,
too.
now that was
And
not
they
clear to me.
handle the
Okay.
criminal piece of that too. So you know, there's criminal side, civil side, right?
Right.
So family court is generally civil, but we also handle the domestic
That's
violence
good.
cases.
That's good.
And they're very involved working with the domestic violence prevention community and lots of training for the judges, so they're sensitive to domestic violence issues. We're the ones who issue the TROs, the restraining orders. And then child abuse and neglect is also handled by family court. So when a child's been abused, the state will step in and maybe remove the children, and every step of that process is overseen by the court.
So what is the standard for child abuse? If I hit my child with a switch, is that child abuse?
Well, okay, so there's criminal child abuse and civil side of child abuse.
Okay, I'm talking crime now.
Yeah. So the standard is actually pretty far along the spectrum for whether it's a crime or not. If the action is based on a disciplinary motive, then and then depending on what kind of damage is done, right? Then it's quite likely that it wouldn't be criminally actionable. On the civil side, it's looking at a bigger picture than just the action, but also the safety of the child. Is this child in imminent harm? And based upon that action, what's the likelihood of other actions and what harm has come to that child? So it's kind of two different lenses on this question of child abuse and neglect. So our Supreme Court has said on the criminal side that the line is kind of far over. As long as, so what your dad would do probably was in the spirit of.
No. What my grandmother did was in the spirit of discipline. But anyway, that's another story.
But it's so hard to determine what's in the best interest of the child, and it's a case-by-case basis. And I know with the Peterson trial, I just read that they determined that one child would be restricted access from him, but all of his other children he could still have access to. And I just think about, is that in the best interest of the child? Does the child now feel like he's being punished even further for something that wasn't his fault? You know, he's separated from his father, where all of his other siblings still get to have that interaction. So,
but a lot of that
that's
gets handed down. But a lot, you know, like Adrian was saying, look, this is the way that we got whoopings. This is the way, and look how I turned out. I'm in the NFL, right? And so he's thinking in his mind that what he's doing truly is discipline. I mean, he wasn't hiding from it. He was texting the kid's mom right after it happened. You know, you're going to be upset, but here's what happened. And he really believed even though it may be wrong, he really believed in his head that what he was doing was right.
And this is a good example of civil side, criminal side too, because taking away the children, that's under the civil side. That's under some child abuse and neglect law, versus the criminal side about whether he will go to jail for the action, right? And Jen's point about the kids, how the kids feel, almost every foster kid feels like that they're being punished. You know, they don't. And if you think about sort of the chain of events, you can see how a kid would think that. I did something wrong. I got punished. Because I was punished, now I'm taken away, right? And so A equals C. And it's really tough.
And also the mindset in the child is, maybe I can do better and this won't happen. They don't see, at least, you know, that they see themselves as the problem, not the parent having the problem. You know, in situations like Adrian, you would hope that there's a program out there that says, hey, look, you know, there's a better way to do this. We know this is how your mom did it, how your grandmother did it, et cetera, but there's a better way.
And there's good research that kind of punishment is just not good parenting, you know. So that's but, you know, on the other hand, the Bible, spare the rod, spoil the child, you know, so where's the place where this is acceptable or not?
What about domestic violence? And you don't have to comment on this if you don't want to, but you know, I think a lot of times people think that when they don't report offenses, or when, I'm using an example, that the police officer that was not charged with domestic violence, or at least it was sent to the prosecutor's office, that somehow we're helping him because he could lose his job, etc. And you know, we think, okay, well, hopefully, but we see repeatedly that a lot of times there's no intervention, whether criminal charges or some type of civil charge with some type of training, that a person may continue on to end up killing somebody.
Yeah. I mean, there's good research about that too, right? That if we don't have consequences, if somebody isn't given some help, you know, with whatever the situation is, that the cycle of abuse can get more and more violent. So it's serious with that. I think that's the message of all of this, is that we have to take this seriously. And for, you know, centuries, right, we didn't, and now we do, but it's still changing and growing.
I mean,
so,
when you see Ray Rice punch his fiance on the elevator, right, and she's knocked out, and he just kind of almost nonchalantly kind of drags her out. You know, you have to, that one was caught on tape, but I mean, I would probably guess, based on my experience, that wasn't the first time that's happened, you know, in that relationship.
Yeah.
And you kind of wonder, what is the mindset that if there is no consequences, how far would this escalate? You know what I mean?
Well, all the dynamics are really complicated, because there's their relationship, you know, underneath the violence, and it's just complicated, and that's why we need to address it.
When you say complicated, and we'll end with this, and the relationship under the violence, how do you, what do you say, they need counseling? I mean, how do you address that situation with the hopes that they still stay together?
You know, I think that understanding and not blaming, and what happens is that in that kind of situation, you know, all that discussion about why did she stay, and why is she defending him, and one place where we have to stop is we need to stop asking those questions and just reach out and help, you know, and then it's also, is it her problem or is it his problem, right? And is it his needing to address how he responds and how he looks at respecting his partner, and so all of those are complicated relationship kinds of issues, but they have to get addressed, and women do stay, and for many reasons. Sometimes economic, sometimes emotional, sometimes it's the children, you know. But I don't know what I'm saying. It's complicated.
And you just can't blame somebody without understanding where they're coming from and walking a mile in their footsteps.
That's right.
The only issue is, I think what you're saying is that everybody has to kind of take a look at their part in this and try to get help for themselves.
Absolutely, and not just dismiss it, you know.
Right.
Well, and then also it's not exactly black and white either. It's not exactly, you know, this person, you know, is wrong. This person is right. It is wrong. Violence is always wrong. But there's more to it. There's always more to it.
All right, we're coming to the end. Jen, you got any last comments on?
No, thank you for having us.
Well, it's my pleasure. Lauri, thank you for coming by.
Thanks.
You did great. Both of you did. You represented the law school well.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right. But again, this is your host, Ken Lawson. And as I say each week, join us next week where we don't know exactly what we're going to be talking about, but we will have guests here talking about something that's law related. What that is, you'll have to stay tuned and find out. See you then.